everybody. Welcome to the new episode of Spark Talks. This is Vanessa. I'm going to be your host today, and we are going to be talking about creative work in PR agencies. Today I'm joined by Walter Kuhn.
Hello.
And Heather Gore.
Hello.
Great to have you guys on the podcast. So this is a topic that's really dear to my heart because I was a graphic designer before I got into marketing. So I've been waiting for us to do this podcast, and I'm super pumped. My first question is, can you guys introduce yourselves and give a really quick background on what you do at Spark?
Sure, absolutely. I'll go first, I guess. As you said, my name is Walter. I am the creative director here at Spark. I was brought in to help build the creative capabilities here, everything from brand identity to advertising campaigns, website design, pretty much anything that's creative. We have a unique ability to do it. We're nimble, we're fast, and usually we can beat out our competitors pretty well.
And with that, I'm Heather Gore. I'm a senior vice president. Just joined about 6 months ago exactly. More than 20 years of experience, both on the traditional PR and corporate communication side, as well as hardcore marketing. So somebody who is actually integrated along with the services. While I work in the enterprise group, I actually also do work with emerging technologies as well as consumer practice. And I spend a lot of my time not just working with our clients directly, but also with our creative and digital services team.
Awesome. I'm glad that you are on this podcast because you can give us a well-rounded view from all perspectives.
I hope so. I like well-rounded. That's good.
All right. So my first actual question for you two is, how does creative work fit into a PR agency?
It's interesting that you asked that. I think in the past it was much less of a factor. And I think actually there were a lot of clients that I encountered, especially 10, 15 years ago, who absolutely thought it was sacrilege to have a PR agency do work on corporate websites or other types of brand identity and digital. In fact, I can remember in the past having pitched business that was integrated and having clients say, why wouldn't I just go to a web developer for that? Why would I buy this from a PR firm? I think that perspective has changed a lot in the market, partly because is now really, to me, consolidation of every creative agency in the market, whether you're advertising, whether you're marketing, whether you're public relations. It's sort of a land grab for one central pot of gold from every client. On top of which I think, it's interesting. We hear from clients every day, and prospective clients especially, who will start their description of themselves by saying that they want to craft a narrative and that they want that narrative to be pervasive in all of their out-facing work. And that, more than anything, is a great reason why you would use one provider to give you everything.
And I'd jump on that as well. I think the thing that's happening now is that all agencies are trying to become very similar. With content marketing being such a monster nowadays, everyone's trying to figure out how to do that. How do you do it cost effectively? How do you get it out quickly? And a lot of other PR agencies are trying to become content makers. But what is content? Content could be anything. I mean, it could be owned, earned, or paid, but is it your website, or are you putting out an ad campaign, whatever it might be, or is it all social? So everything is blending and bleeding in with each other that it's hard to distinguish things. So if we already have the ear of a client and we're able to understand their business really well and be able to be nimble and quick, being able to deliver on other services is just easier for them. It's less for them to manage. A lot of times it's really hard to deal with multiple agencies at the same time. There are different egos, who does what are the rules. Sometimes it can turn into a fist fight when there's multiple agencies all fighting over the same thing. So for a client to be able to go to one agency and be able to get all these services at once, it's a benefit to them, and it just makes life a little bit easier.
Well, and it's interesting. I want to just point out one thing that Walter said that I think is one place where PR firms have had a hard time evolving as the market is consolidated, and that is when they think of content, they think only of the written word. And that's partly where creative can solve a lot of problems, because the adage is true, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so a lot of times I think as PR people who are steeped in words, it's easy to forget that there are lots of other things that are content.
Yeah, I can imagine in any individual company, it seems as though even interdepartmentally there is issue with communication. So I can only imagine if you had a creative agency doing something and then your PR agency doing something, like how could you even get a narrative out of that?
Right, and that's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to come up with an overarching narrative. It's hard to do what we like to call sing from the same hymn sheet when you have lots of different disparate parts, lots of different consultants, lots of different vendors, all of whom have ego attached, all of whom come at the market from a different perspective. And it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. And I think that's another reason, to Walter's point, that it makes sense if you can find an agency that understands your business and that has the capability and the skill set and the wherewithal to do it, you're much better off with sort of a one-stop shop, even if you let those guys sub-manage for you, in a way, is what I would say. So, I think it's easier for clients sort of from top to bottom to use one firm who can give them everything and make sure that there's sort of a clean throughput.
So I think you answered my second question, which is why would you get creative work from a PR company instead of having a separate agency? But is there anything else you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, traditionally I came back from traditional ad agencies and digital agencies. So working at a PR agency, which we're integrated marketing, but everyone knows us for PR. For me, I get a big kick out of surprising and delighting the client when they come to us and they're like, oh, you can do that? And we can do it really well. That's the part that I love the most, because for me, my big part here is going to be organic growth. Give us a shot. Let us try one project. 9 times, out of 9, or I guess 10 times out of 10, you want to say, usually people are really impressed and happy with the work. So we start with one project, usually leads to 2 projects, and then before you know it, we've done a huge integrated marketing campaign for them. So for me, that's what really excites me, is to be able to surprise people because they don't see us coming.
Yeah, I would say to that point, I think, Spark sits in a really interesting place in the market. And it was one of the reasons I chose to come here. And that is working with fast growing startups and people who have an idea. The idea has caught validity in the market. They're showing the right kinds of growth. Many times they come to us either, after seed funding or on the cusp of announcing an A round of pretty significant, millions of dollars in funding. And they're sort of in panic mode. And then panic mode a lot of times does include, can you do a website? Can you make a video for me? What else can you do? Oh my gosh, I'm under all this pressure. Oh my gosh, I need to have all of these things to show to all my constituencies. And what's interesting too, as somebody who grew up as a utility player, first on the PR side and then on the marketing side as well, is the ability to deliver on business goals for clients. So, thinking way beyond even an overarching narrative or from sort of a marketing and traditional PR perspective, I can think about projects I've done during my career that involved supporting sales or supporting, joint ventures or supporting marketing partners or things like that sort of sit outside of what people think of as a traditional scope. But if it's something that helps your client move their business forward, they're always going to be delighted and extremely pleased with the work.
Okay, I want to touch on something that both of you brought up a little bit earlier. I have a friend who's an art director at Ogilvy's traditional advertising section, and we were talking one day and I thought, hey, are you a competitor to us? And it turns out Ogilvy, their PR section is ranked number 8 in the world. And so it got me to wondering, are different types of agencies trying to all become integrated agencies? Are they going after the same audience? And what does that mean for the future of integrated agencies?
I think it's an interesting question. I think for me, I never thought of it as completely disconnected, in part because a long time ago, there was consolidation of ad conglomerates gobbling up PR firms for precisely the idea of owning an end-to-end solution that they could provide to clients. But I think even beyond that, what's really interesting about the business today is that because the way we communicate with people has changed so much, I think that's part of what forces the consolidation. So, if we think about it back in the day, some of your only channels were either, earned media in terms of print stories or broadcast stories or traditional TV advertisement or a newspaper advertisement. That was kind of it. And, today now it's like anyone can sign up for a free Twitter account and a free Facebook page and a free LinkedIn page. Like, there are all these available bullhorns sitting around, right, to broadcast your message. So it changes the paradigm also, I think, of what I consider direct audiences and what I call throughput audiences. So, not only are we now communicating with journalists and other decision makers, but we're communicating directly with, in a lot of cases, the core audience of our clients.
Yeah, I'd say audience is a huge component to it. Being able to push content to them, but then also able to deal with what they say back. It's so not one-sided conversation, and it shouldn't be anymore, and people expect that. So that interplay is going to be really important. That's why so many agencies are all starting to look similar in what they can offer. Some are better than others, for sure. Someone like the size of an Ogilvy, they're a monster, global kind of agency. So what's happened over the last few years is that you have large global agencies that are gobbling up smaller entities to say, we offer all of this. And then you have a lot of mid-tier agencies that are starting to say, should we only specialize in one thing? And you see a lot of that. So it's what's left in the middle they're the ones that are finding different ways to try to stand out. And really the way you're going to stand out in this industry at this point is, what ideas do you bring to the table? How do you strategically think? And then how do you implement? Because you can find a lot of places to implement and do production, and they do a great job. I think what Spark and the people here at Spark, where we have a leg up, are thought leaders. We have a lot of people who can inspire, a lot of people who have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. And when you bring that all together, that makes us stand out.
Yeah, and to Walter's point, I think it's really interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of bullhorns sitting around, but to your point, they really need to be thought of as sort of two-way communications, radios. And it's easy to talk. It's harder to listen and react responsibly. So I think, that's something that we can bring to the table in a way that I think a lot of other traditional agencies from outside the scope sometimes have a hard time thinking about. I think also what is really interesting about what's going on with today's market is just the fact that because you can reach original audiences as well as throughput audiences, you get a lot of interesting mix of creative now, and because I feel like essentially there are no boundaries anymore. That makes it really much more interesting to do. And to Walter's point, when he talked about sort of tactical execution, I think another thing that really differentiates us that he talked about is the ability to do the head think. There's a lot of agencies out there that you can get for what are called tactical arms and legs. It's much harder to find people who are strategic, who can give you the head think in a way that is really going to profoundly change your business.
It's about communication. It's honestly all about communication. Now, whatever that might be, if it's a video, if it's a picture, if it's an ad, if it's a social post, if it's a promotion, it doesn't matter. It has to communicate to the right audience at the right time. And technology is giving another layer of impact on that. So how do you bifurcate and trifurcate messages at a moment's notice, and how do you reach that audience at the right time when they're doing that? So that messaging and getting that messaging again at the right time is now like the next layer on top of it all.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I also wanted to ask you too, since you have a lot of experience, what is your favorite creative campaign that you've seen or worked on in the past? Or bonus points if you have a weirdest campaign.
I'll say I have to think about that. I think one of the funniest things I think about, and it was not my campaign, and I have no ideas who it was, but it was really funny. I went to an in-person briefing with a journalist many years ago, and he actually had a hall of shame of weird promotional mailings and press kits that he used to get from startups. And his most favorite at the time was a press release rolled up in a dirty gym sock. So that was probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
What?
Interesting. Did it get a good response that they were hoping for?
I think in their own special way they did. I'm not sure. I will say this: they got attention. I don't think it was positive attention, but I think some people do live by the adage that there's no such thing as bad press, and I think these guys were all in on that theory. And I will say this for them: he essentially, in his own way, became a brand ambassador for them, because it was actually a required tour after every in-person briefing that he would show everyone who came through his office his Hall of Shame, and he would actually spend time showing the dirty sock and pulling out the materials in it. And so in an inadvertent way, I think it probably worked to their advantage for a while.
Wow.
For myself, weirdest, I would say, the weirdest and hardest thing I ever had to work on was toilet paper. It's the one product that you can't really show and use. You have a really hard time of talking about it, because if you say one thing over the other, you will offend. And I won't say the brand that we worked on, but we basically created a spokesperson. We looked at their heritage, and we found this sweet, beautiful little girl who was 7 years old, and we were able to use her as the brand ambassador for the brand. But it was hilarious, though, because when we were concepting ideas and trying to figure out what she was going to be, the commercial we ended up doing a national spot for them. So she was a little scientist, and she was doing all these experiments on the toilet paper. But for us, we wanted it all to be in her world. So we didn't want to cut away what most brands in that industry would do. Would be, you cut away, you see the blue liquid being poured on something, and you're like, all right, great. So we want everything to be in this one reality in her room. But all the calls that we had with the clients and all the meetings around the conference room tables, there would be the CMO and all these very important people there. And we're basically talking about dingleberries. We're talking about these things that you're like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to talk about this stuff. But everything had a science. You find out people how they use it and why they use it, if they're a crumpler, if they're something else. And it was fascinating. So it was very strange. But I remember at one point I had to fly to the toilet paper lab. There's an actual lab where they will experiment on product innovations. And we had to work with their toilet paper scientists to come up with a real experiment that we could apply this all to. So things I've never done in my life before, but were fun and interesting to go take on. So for me, that was one of the more fun, but also very weird and puzzling things to work on.
Walter, is dingleberry a technical term?
It is, yes, it is. It is a technical term.
Are there any other technical terms that we should know as responsible bathroom users?
Well, there are people that have very strong preferences. So if you are someone who wants a very durable toilet paper versus something very soft. And there is very strong brand loyalty in that environment. So it's really interesting. You don't think about toilet paper, but if you switch it on someone, they get pissed.
That's funny. I love it.
Yeah.
Now I know. And if I'm not a water, what else would I be if I don't wad up my paper?
There you can fold. You can, I forget what the other one is, but currently right now, I mean, what I'm excited about, I'd say, are all the current campaigns that we're working on. And since, we're working on them, I can't say what the names are, but we're doing everything from brand identity, where we're renaming a product and doing logos and icon design. We are also about to jump into a global advertising campaign, which is super exciting. And, that's not typically what you think about going to a PR agency for. But like I said, surprise and delight. So those are things that I'm really super excited about for the near future.
Yeah, some of my most fun campaigns I worked on in the past, as well as currently, worked for a company that went out and found a real woman named .com. So we could find the real .com. We actually did find her on the very last day of the contest. and she ended up appearing on Jay Leno. It was that far back, so that was really fun. We put a guy up on a billboard. He lived there for a week trying to find dates. That was fun. We took rescue dogs to the Russian tea room. So done all kinds of really fun things that have been really interesting and surprising. Some of the things that we're working on currently that I'm excited to use personally and be around is, besides the ones that Walter mentioned, we're also working with an international firm who's bringing a new software product to market, and we're working on MacBook stickers, sort of the next, like, what could be a super cool, trendy, new, like, I must have this on my MacBook.
Awesome. You guys make it sound so fun.
The thing that I love about this industry and what I say gets me out of bed every morning is that one of the benefits of working here at Spark 2 is that we have a variety of clients. So it could be something from an emerging technology, it could be a consumer product, it could be something that is going to change the world on a business enterprise level. So learning all these different things, finding out what they do, talking to the people who are creating them too, is fascinating. You meet the most interesting people and talk about things that you never would have. I didn't realize like there was toilet paper scientists, but there are other parts of other industries that you learn, and most people don't even know this. And to find that insight, I think, is really interesting. And have that ability to connect with these people is really interesting, because what it does is it makes, on the creative side, I'd say what we do that more impactful, because we get really a different view of what they're trying to do, and then trying to figure out how can you communicate that to a variety of different audiences, and finding that connection, finding something that's going to connect on a level that is emotional, inspiring, not just technical, is really, a huge fun challenge, and that never gets old, no matter what it is, because you're creating stories, you're creating things that have never existed before, and to me that's great, because when I was a little kid, all I did was have stories in my head about random things all day long. I would daydream in school. I was probably the worst student because I was so much interested in everything that wasn't school related at the time. So for me, this is like a perfect job, because all I can do is just come up with different stories and ideas all day.
Wow, that is pretty inspiring, Walter. I'm going to end it on that because I don't think I can beat that. But if anybody out there has any questions or comments, or if you want to share your own weird campaigns, feel free to tweet us at SparkPR, and we will get back to you, and hopefully we will be able to address your comments on the next podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, Walter, Heather, and I'll see you on the next podcast.
Get that more block out and see the bottom line rise.